Thank you for playing this informative video. Please like, share, and follow. The hidden connections between Jesus, Rome, and the modern world. Let's take a step back in time to the 1st century, a turbulent period when the Roman Empire was expanding its influence far and wide. Among the many lands under Roman control was Judea, a place that was home to Jesus of Nazareth. But here's the part we don't often think about. Judea wasn't just under Roman rule. It was a colony of Rome. Yes, a colony. A place stripped of its autonomy, its people subject to the economic exploitation and cultural domination of a distant empire. If that sounds familiar, it should. Today, we see the echoes of Rome in modern empires and corporations that dominate lands and lives in eerily similar ways. And here's the kicker. If Jesus walked the earth today, he wouldn't just recognize these systems, he would condemn them. The Roman colony in Jesus' time. Imagine living in Judea under Roman rule. The land was taxed heavily, the wealth extracted to fuel the ambitions of the empire. Local rulers like King Herod were puppets, enforcing Roman policies and keeping the people in line. Soldiers patrolled the streets, ensuring that anyone who dared to question the empire paid a heavy price. The people of Judea were exploited, their traditions undermined, their autonomy stripped away. This was the world Jesus was born into, a world where the Romans dictated everything from commerce to religion. And what was Jesus' response? He spoke out. He challenged the corrupt systems and the leaders who upheld them. He flipped the tables in the temple, calling out the money changers who exploited the poor. Now think about this. Isn't that exactly what's happening today? Corporations and governments extract wealth from the people, control resources, and silence dissent. The parallels are striking. Rome's colonial legacy lives on. The United States, as we know it, is often seen as a beacon of freedom. But if you dig deeper, you'll see it for what it truly is, a modern colony of Rome. Look at the architecture in Washington, D.C. The columns, the domes, the Latin inscriptions. These are all remnants of Roman influence. But it's not just about aesthetics. The very systems of law, governance, and economics in the United States are rooted in Roman ideals. And just like Rome, the United States has extended its reach across the globe, extracting wealth and resources from other nations, often under the guise of progress or democracy. What we're seeing is the same playbook Rome used in Jesus' time: colonize, dominate, and extract. The role of the Church and the Doctrine of Discovery. Let's not forget the role of the Roman Catholic Church in all this. From its earliest days, the Church was intertwined with the Roman Empire. When Constantine made Christianity the empire's official religion, it wasn't just about faith, it was about control. And with control came colonization. One of the most devastating tools the Church wielded was the Doctrine of Discovery. What was the Doctrine of Discovery? It was a series of papal bulls or decrees issued by the Catholic Church in the 15th century. These decrees declared that Christian explorers had the right to claim lands they discovered for their monarchs, as long as those lands were not inhabited by Christians. Indigenous peoples were deemed heathens, and their lands were considered free for the taking. This doctrine was the foundation for European colonialism in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. It justified the enslavement, displacement, and extermination of indigenous peoples. Spanish and Portuguese explorers, backed by the Catholic Church, didn't just conquer, they erased. Cultures, languages, and entire civilizations were wiped out in the name of the Church. And here's the part that will shock you. The Doctrine of Discovery is still being used today. In the United States, it's the legal foundation for land ownership and federal laws regarding indigenous peoples. In 1823, the U.S. Supreme Court explicitly referenced the Doctrine of Discovery in Johnson versus McIntosh, a case that ruled indigenous peoples did not have full ownership of their land. This precedent has never been overturned. Even now, the Catholic Church has yet to formally revoke the Doctrine of Discovery. Think about that. A system of oppression born in the Roman Empire, carried forward by the Church, still shapes the lives of millions today. Jesus and rebellion. Jesus wasn't just a spiritual leader, he was a revolutionary. He didn't just preach love and forgiveness, he challenged the status quo. He stood against the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Roman authorities, all of whom upheld systems of oppression. And for that, he was executed. Now imagine Jesus walking into the United States today. What would he see? Corporations exploiting workers, governments waging wars for profit, people worshipping wealth and power instead of justice and compassion. He would see indigenous peoples fighting for their land and rights, their struggles ignored by a system rooted in the very doctrine of discovery that justifies their oppression. Jesus would hate the West, not its people, but the systems of oppression that mirror those of Rome. The role of the doctrine in South America. The best example of the Church's colonial ambitions is South America. When European powers arrived, they brought crosses and swords. Entire nations were converted at gunpoint. Indigenous peoples were forced to adopt Christianity, their own spiritual practices deemed heretical. And once they were converted, their lands and resources were claimed in the name of God and King. This wasn't just about faith, it was about control. The Catholic Church became one of the largest landowners in the world, its wealth built on the backs of indigenous peoples. And the legacy of this exploitation persists today. In countries like Brazil, indigenous peoples are still fighting to protect their lands from corporations, governments, and yes, even the church. History repeats itself. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Rome's goal was always domination, whether through military conquest or cultural assimilation. And that legacy lives on. Look at how indigenous lands were taken in the Americas. Look at how nations in Africa and Asia were colonized for their resources. The playbook hasn't changed, it's just been updated for modern times. Even today, when someone speaks out against these systems, they're often met with hostility. Remember how Jesus was rejected by his own people when he warned them about the dangers of Roman rule? It's the same today. People would rather cling to the systems they know, even if those systems oppress them, than embrace the uncomfortable truth. The untold story of Scotland. Here's a historical nugget for you. The Romans never fully conquered Scotland. Despite their best efforts, the fierce resistance of the Scottish people kept Rome at bay. It's a powerful reminder that empires, no matter how strong, are not invincible. What does that mean for us today? It means resistance is possible. It means we don't have to accept the systems of exploitation and oppression that dominate our world. And it means we can learn from the past to build a better future. Closing thoughts. Jesus wasn't just a figure of faith. He was a figure of resistance. He stood against the most powerful empire of his time and paid the ultimate price for it. But his message didn't die with him. It lives on in every act of defiance against oppression, in every effort to build a world rooted in justice and compassion. As we reflect on history, let's remember this. The systems we live under today are not new. They're the latest chapters in a story that began long ago. And just as Jesus stood up to Rome, we can stand up to the modern empires that seek to control our lives. From the doctrine of discovery to the unchecked power of corporations, the fight continues. The question is, will we rise up? Or will we, like the people of Jesus' time, reject the truth when it's right in front of us? The revolution didn't end with Jesus, it began with him. Thank you for watching.